see. Okay, now I can record. Great. So yeah, now we're recording. Before we get started, I really wanted to give a big thank you to Rose at Nonprofit Connection for putting this together. Thank you so much. I'm just ecstatic to be able to meet with all of you, and I'm really excited to potentially partner with all of you. So as I'd mentioned before, I saw a couple new people join on. We're going to keep the everyone muted for now. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put it in the chat. That will help us record the questions to update our slides later. And then it'll also just help as we're recording, then, to kind of minimize faces popping up and stuff like that. And after we're done with the main part of the presentation, we'll turn the recording off, and then we can open it for live questions. You can unmute yourself. All righty, so welcome. We'll get started here. So off-campus work study information session for nonprofits. So my name's Heidi, she, her, they pronouns. I am the LAEP, the Learning Aligned Employment Program, and the work study coordinator for UC Santa Cruz. And with me is Alma. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Alma. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm the internship coordinator for HSI and EOP initiative. So I'm on the same team with Heidi. I coordinate a program that you will hear about later.
And also joining us today is Andy Cunningham with Boys and Girls Club. They are a previous work study partner, so they'll provide some insight of what it's like to partner as a work study. All right, objectives today is to let you all know about how to partner with the UCSC work study program. And then we also wanted to inform you about the GANA's Career Internship Program, which supports underrepresented, low-income, and/or Latinx students. And then we'll do a Q&A with Andy and the Boys and Girls Club. All right, so the question you're all wondering, what is work study? Work study, it's a federally funded work-based learning program. And for the student, it's really beneficial because they get to work with awesome nonprofits in Santa Cruz, and they get to earn income for that work, which is great. And for the nonprofit benefit, you get to hire talented, motivated UCS students at a reduced cost. So work study covers 75% of the student's wages, up to $4,000 per year, depending on the student's financial need. So each student receives a unique award depending on their financial need, which will not total more than $4,000. So what that means is you as a nonprofit would pay 25% of the student's wage plus a 10% administrative fee. So that totals to a 35% of the student's wage you'd be paying. And students are formally onboarded by UCSC, but the nonprofit would be responsible for any kind of background checks or any kind of additional CANRA or background checks needed for the position. The first day students can work is September 23rd in these positions, and they can remain funded throughout the year until the award is exhausted or until June 13th, whichever one comes first. So in other words, students can't, their wages can't be subsidized for work over the summer. And students can work up to 15 hours per week, and minimum wage is $15.50, but wages should be comparable to industry standards for your nonprofit. So the organizations that qualify, you must meet all this criteria. You must be a nonprofit, non-political, non-religious, and for national community welfare. And the ways you get involved is you simply submit an application bundle for this year. The application bundle is linked here, and Alma should be adding it to the chat if you want to see what that looks like. The application bundle is something you just print out, fill out, provide your IRS state franchise board letter or exemption or article of incorporation. And then you'd also need to identify who is the overseeing supervisor in that form, and then you would just email it to us at ucscel@ucsc.edu. And then once we review and approve your application, then you can start posting jobs in Handshake under the with work study. And we'll only once we approve your application would we be able to essentially edit your account so that you can actually post work study jobs to our work study students in Handshake. So how we recruit students, or how you would recruit students, is that starting September 4th, you can start posting and recruiting for work-study students. And we do that through Handshake. And Handshake, I put a link here for how you can create an employer account, but essentially you would connect to your nonprofit company, and then yeah, you would start recruiting for work-study students. Something to keep in mind is that the work-study pool of students is a lot smaller than the entire student population. So you may only have a couple students apply to your position just because the pool is smaller. So I would just treat those applicants as competitive applicants. And things you would be including in your job posting is a descriptive job title, a detailed job description, which would include like highlighting your goals and strengths as an organization. You would outline percentages of job duties, and you would summarize preferred versus qualified versus required qualifications. And I also have a link here, which Alma will put in the chat, which is our guide for writing an effective job description. This is kind of the standard that we will be reviewing your job posting with. All right. So how you hire students, pretty simple, is once you found a student from the Handshake applicant pool, you would mark them as hired in the hire system, or in the Handshake system, and you would submit an intent to hire Google form, which you can include that as well if you'd like. Essentially, you're just going to identify who you are, who the student supervisor is, their name and student ID number, and the Handshake job ID from which you advertise the job for, and anticipated start and end dates, and the wage and average hours per week. And we'll just check that with our records that we have based on your application. And then the student onboards with us. So how long can a student work through WorkStudy? This is a question we get a lot. Long story short, it depends. So students' awards vary. They can have an award anywhere from like $1,000 to $4,000. And the students' availability varies. So they may only be available for 5 hours per week, or some might be available 15 hours per week. And then of course the wages across all the organizations are different. So I thought it'd be good to give an example. So if a student has a $4,000 award and is hired to work 10 hours per week at $18 an hour, they can work for about 22 weeks, or about 5.5 months. We hope that you would consider ways to continue employment after these funds are exhausted, but understand that might not always be possible. And then if you do wish to continue to employ the student would need to formally onboard onto your payroll. So how do timesheets work? Essentially, timesheets are processed by the Financial Aid and Scholarship Office. So what happens is the student uses our timesheet processing system, which is called Cruise Pay, and they submit that biweekly. And then the Financial Aid and Scholarship Office, we call it FASO for short, will email you a time reporting worksheet, and you essentially will need to verify the student's hours that they reported. And then you would scan and email that to FASO. The way billing works is that the business services will invoice you for the 25% of wages and the 10% administrative surcharge. And those invoices come about the middle of each month for the previous month's work. And in that invoice, it will include an itemized description of the amounts due to UCSC. Great, so I'm just going to overview about the process here. So right now you can submit an application. It'll take about 1 or 2 days for us to process your application. After which, once you're approved, you can post a job in Handshake. You can start recruiting students starting September 4th. And then after that, you will submit your hire request form to me, and which identifies what student we want to hire. Now, for new employers with us, it may take a little time for us to kind of set up all the funding data that we need to set up on our end for the hire. So I'm unsure how long that might take for new partnerships, but we hope it wouldn't take very long. After that, the student would formally onboard with us, and they will have to obtain a blue card. Once onboarding starts, it's really up to the student how long it takes. It could take a day if the student's just really on top of it, but it could also take, 1 to 2 weeks if the student's, really stressed with, has a lot on their plate, and might not be able to get to it right away. But once they have their blue card in hand, the student can start working starting September 23rd. And like I had mentioned before, they can work all the way to June 13th or until their award is exhausted. So just to recap some important dates about WorkStudy right now, the application bundle is open September 4th. Job postings can open or can start September 23rd. First day student can work. June 13th, last day student can work. And then, yeah, we're really looking forward to collaborating with you. Though we have here, Alma, if you would provide the WorkStudy website, so you can check that out in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can please email me at ucscel@ucsantacruz or ucsc.edu. And with that, I can answer any questions in the chat. Alma, would you mind reading them off?
There are currently no questions. It was me. But if you all want to start sending in questions, we could answer. So the first one we have in, is it a 1099 or do we pay taxes?
Oh, I would not know the full answer to that as of now. I can, does anyone here have any thoughts on that? See, I'm a little bit unsure of the
one of the benefits that I can speak to, Rose, is we don't pay payroll taxes on these. I think they're sort of included in the admin fee that we pay to UCSC. So to my knowledge, there is no need to do a 1099 or to pay taxes. That's essentially a service that you're hiring from UCSC in terms of those invoices. So you don't have to do either of those things. But I can double check with that and follow up with you if it's different from Hayden. So that's a benefit, is you don't pay workers' comp, you don't pay into 401k or health benefits or any of those things. But I think some of that cost is then rolled into the 10% surcharge that gets added on.
And I will also verify that and answer that with validity in an email to you all. Any other questions, Alma?
Not at the moment, but if anyone thinks of a question, feel free to put it in the chat. We could wait a bit if anything, if someone's typing.
Can Andy tell us about his experience?
Yes, we'll be covering his experience after in a few minutes. All right, so yeah, Alma, would you like to take it from here?
There's actually one more question that came.
Sure.
So I definitely want to make sure we address it.
Yeah.
What type of jobs or roles with WorkStudy?
Yeah, so roles, it can really be anything. There's no real restrictions. Of course, we would like to see what it is that you would like to offer as a potential job. So you would include that in your application of your thoughts of what a job would be for a student. But we want positions to be, career related work. So it could be anything from research to administrative and anything in between. So yeah, we want the student to gain some real work experience. And I know that could be different across nonprofits. So no real big restriction there. But if I think of anything, I will report back in an email as well.
Yeah, and I can also provide in the chat the NACE career readiness competencies. So those competencies are put out by the National Association of Colleges and Employers around what employers want to see with students that are recently graduated. So sometimes it is helpful to include some of those competencies within your position. So some of these are like communication, critical thinking, for example. And there's 8 that I could put in a PDF in the chat. But we also have another question that came in, Heidi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are part of the hours they will be paid for going towards credit hours for a course? For example, would they be writing regular reflections as part of their position?
It's not required for work study itself, but if the student wants to get academic credit for their work with you, they have to set that up with their academic advisors. And so it's really kind of up to the department of whether or not they would approve the work as being something they can get credit for. But there's no restrictions from us about that. And there's nothing implemented on our end to enforce or not enforce any of that. So really the student is, in your hands once they start working with you. And I guess that is a good point that I'm thinking of is that, for our new partners, we will do a site visit just to make sure that, the student will have appropriate supervision and that the place of work is appropriate. Since, we're essentially vouching for you and employing the student through us, but in vouching for you. So that will be part of the process as well. Some of that might be virtual. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a note here. Andy can speak more about the common roles at the work study roles at Boys and Girls Club in a bit. And then there was a question from Rose that said not particularly nonprofit jobs. So I don't know if you want to further elaborate on that.
It has to be associated with your nonprofit, the job. It can't be associated with any for-profit work.
Okay.
And just remember, as a reminder, right, there will be someone on your payroll, right, that is the timesheet approver and the supervisor of the student.
Yeah, and I would say too, Rose, to that question about nonprofit jobs, again, for the Boys and Girls Club, a lot of our work study staff are youth-facing mentors, essentially. So they're doing homework help, they're preparing snacks and meals. They're doing the core work of the Boys and Girls Club as a nonprofit organization to serve local youth. That said, we do have some families that are paying program fees. So if you're a nonprofit that has program fees and things like that, that's still not, for-profit work. So I don't know. I think within the normal scope of work that you do, that your board of directors and the state and the IRS are overseeing, I would think of like Gray Bears runs a thrift shop. So having somebody who's helping in the administration and running of that to fund the food programs, that's still nonprofit work, right?
Thank you, Andy.
And we do have a follow-up question. What about virtual?
Virtual?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we do encourage virtual work for sure. Something to keep in mind is that work study awards typically are given to freshmen and sophomores. It's not that older students can't receive work study. It's just that if they don't ever use their work study award, they won't be re-awarded it. So that kind of weeds out a lot of like seniors and things like that. So given that it's and the demographic of students that the work study is serving, it's for students with financial need. Students may not be able to drive to your locations and do in-person work. So virtual options are really great. One, for advertising for the work, for the job. Students have a big appetite for virtual work. And then two, just because students might not actually be able to get to you, it might be good to offer virtual options if possible, or at least hybrid. All right, Alma, let's go ahead and move forward, and then we can answer questions at the end as well.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more now about what is a potential for the future. We do have the Ganas Career Internship Program. And if a person or an organization wanted to serve as an internship site to host students, but with the Work Study Award, you can do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what exactly is the Ganas Career Internship Program? So it was a program that was initiated as part of an HSI grant that we received from the Department of Education a few years ago. We are officially, I believe, entering year 4 now of the 5-year grant. And so one of the goals of the grant was to create an internship program where students that are underrepresented, low income, and or Latinx are doing paid internships in one of the 6 high demand fields of California. So these were the 6 fields that were designated as high demand. Accounting, finance has one, agriculture, biotech, education, teaching, health, and STEM. And so we're really looking for organizations, whether they're work study or not work study, that want to host students that are for paid internships in one of these aforementioned industries. And so your organization doesn't have to be like a tech organization. It could be an organization that's looking for a tech internship position, for example. So a lot of flexibility with those fields, just as a note. So what are the benefits of participating as an internship site? So you'll hear me saying internship site, host site. I use those interchangeably, but essentially it's an organization that's hosting the student, whether virtual, in-person, or hybrid. And so the benefits of an internship site partner is that we on our end manage all of the marketing of the position. So we are advertising to the different departments on our campus, to the resource centers, really targeting students that would meet the criteria. And we support the students with application materials. So we offer drop-in sessions where they can get help with resumes, with the short responses for like applying to your site and so forth. The additional part is once the student is in this role, right, during the academic year, we provide them professional development as well. And so they do what are called Canvas modules that are on career readiness topics as well as financial literacy topics. And they get coaching from us at least one session once per quarter. So these are really good support systems for the student, especially if this is their first internship that they're doing. So they're doing the work with you, but they're also getting all of the support when they're applying, when they're already in the experience. And if you are curious for our last year's cohort where they were at or the type of internship positions that they were doing, that is the hyperlink that will be on the slide deck where you could just go through some of the students. So what are the program requirements? What do we ask a site to do? So we do ask sites to host the student between 10 to 12 hours during the full academic year, to meet with the student at least once per week as a check-in. So this is just the best practice that we've noticed helps supervisors and students really be on the same page, provide support and ongoing training as needed. Train the student. So sometimes the students, you get to like interview the students, but sometimes they need a little bit more like training, right? With like, for example, Google Forms, Qualtrics, whatever you may need at your site. And so we do ask that the site train the student because they're predominantly going to be doing work with you. And then as part of our grant, we do want to assess, is the program working? Are these internships really supporting students? So we do have 2 10-minute assessments that you fill out in supervising the student. And again, they're throughout the year. So it's just really telling us like pre and post career growth. So how does an organization apply to be part of the program? So I'm going to have you all put aside WorkStudy for now, but this is the general process in which organizations have tried to be part of the program. So they submit in winter time a position proposal that basically asks the site to list what is the position description. So very similar to Heidi's WorkStudy position, right? The percentage of what the student would be doing, what you want the required qualifications to be, the priority qualifications or preferred qualifications. And then on this form, you also get to list how many interns you want to host. So we have a limited positions of how many students can go through our program. So we just want to make sure like we're being equitable with the organizations that are submitting. One quick note is that because again, these are paid internships, we do want organizations to be responsible in funding the intern directly. So the rate that we have mentioned is at least $16 per hour because it's a little bit above minimum wage and or an equivalent stipend. We have heard organizations sometimes are not able to do like constant payroll versus like biweekly pay. So they could provide a stipend in lieu, and it just has to be like the equivalent rate of 16 per hour. So now here's the fun part. You can request a student with the WorkStudy award. So that is also a possibility. We are trying it out for the first time this year with the Boys and Girls Club. So we're really excited about that because we know students that are underrepresented want to participate in these opportunities, and we do know organizations need a little bit of a subsidy. So the process in which how that can work, we will share too, but the official position proposal form will open in winter time because we recruit the year prior. So the next slide shows the typical timeline of how this works. So in the winter time, December to February, we open up the position proposal form. So I'm meeting with organizations that are interested, and I get to coach them and support them in the process of submitting this form. It's very straightforward. It's just really, how are you going to have a meaningful experience for the student, and which of the industries does it align with? Then once we approve the organizations, we help them post it on Handshake with specific marketing material. So you are designated as a Ganas career internship site, which we then promote to students. So you're part of this like list of organizations, you could think of it. And then in March, April is when we help the students apply. So anyone that wants to apply for these programs basically comes to us, and we support them with resume application support. Then you all get to interview the eligible students. So this is a really fun part because you will see that students do want internships and they want paid experiences. So you get to meet them and get to interview them, whether it's virtual or in person. For the most part, organizations have interviewed virtual because of students since they're full-time students. And then the final part is the matching process. So organizations get to rank who are their top candidates, and students get to rank organizations they interview with back. So this helps us do a matching process where we match you with one of your top candidates, but we also see if the student wants to be matched with you as well. And this also eliminates you having to make multiple offers because you already know this student wants to be with you. So I put a little asterisk around timeline because sometimes we do have to play around with the timeline deadlines if organizations need more time to submit a position proposal form, or if we need students to have a little bit more time with the interviews and so forth. But this is generally the process. So then by the time summer begins, you already know exactly who's going to be with your organization. And then the final slide, I believe, is next. Yes. So because it is until winter time when the formal form opens up, it's going to come by fast though. We're already at the end of summer. Please submit an interest form. There's only like a quick 3 questions. It'll take you a minute that asks like, who is the organization you're with? Who do you want to be contacted? And then the last question, I believe, is what type of organization are you at? Because this is open to multiple. So you don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit, but that is feasible. And then feel free to reach out with any questions to me at the ganas_ci@ucsc.edu. If you don't remember that email, just send it to the UCSC EL one for WorkStudy, and Heidi will forward it to me. So yeah, we're really excited though. We want you to know about all the different types of ways you can engage with students, especially something that's going to be supportive for both you as an organization and the student.
Thank you, Alma. All right, we will field questions regarding Ganas after our Q&A here with Andy. So thank you again, Andy, for being with us. We're just going to ask a couple questions and then we will stop recording and we'll open up questions for everyone to unmute. All right, Andy, so what are the benefits of being a WorkStudy partner to a nonprofit organization?
Yeah, thanks. So first off, and Heidi, it's one of the first things she mentioned, the fact that UCSC is using federal funds to subsidize the pay rate means, you know, they're covering 75% of the cost. We as the nonprofit are paying 25% plus that 10% admin fee. And as I mentioned, we also aren't paying payroll taxes. So for an organization like the Boys and Girls Club, you know, we're a $2.4 million organization. $1.7 million of that is just payroll, staff and getting mentors there for the kids. And so for us, I think our WorkStudy last year contributed about $60,000 towards that. So it's not an insignificant amount of money when we look at fundraising or grant writing or other forms of that. So the cost is a huge part. I think also it introduces us to new candidates that we might not reach otherwise through traditional job postings. We do a lot of postings on LinkedIn, Indeed, things like that. But when we post our positions on WorkStudy through Heidi, we're reaching a different crowd, and that's really exciting for us. And I think another one obviously is we are reaching a lot of young professionals with mutual interests in things that we care about and we want to provide to our youth that we serve in the club. And so through WorkStudy, we find a lot of student staff members that have an interest in education, in STEM fields, in psychology and social work. And so a lot of these are more direct service kind of program and maybe less of the administrative side. But we're reaching people that really have a mutual interest in the work that we're doing. And I would say from getting to know a lot of our WorkStudy students, I also love that they have their own individual passions that might be different from the thing that they're studying. So we have a WorkStudy student this year who is serving in one of our YDP roles. For us, this is sort of the entry-level youth development professional, tends to be kind of around that $16 an hour minimum wage kind of role. And this is the bread and butter of serving youth in our clubs. And this WorkStudy student that I'm thinking of loves music and specifically singing. And so for us, that's something where we can plug her into sort of the creative arts area and put her in the music room. And so she had our youth recording like a cappella Christmas albums or holiday songs. And so that's the kind of thing where she can flex her love for singing into that way. Whereas another person who loves STEM might be doing sort of homework help in the STEM or STEAM room. So I think you get their personalities, and that can be really important when working with kids or working with community or populations where that authentic connection is so important.
Awesome. And can you speak a little bit more to what the benefit is for the student or what you've seen students' growth?
Yeah, I think from what I hear back, it's a great launching point for a lot of the WorkStudy students. So they can get a taste of what they think they want to do in their career. A lot of our former WorkStudy students have gone on to master's programs or roles in community leadership or policy or administration. And a lot of them really got their first taste of that kind of work with the Boys and Girls Club. I would say it's also a mutual benefit. It's good for the WorkStudy staff, but it's also great for organizations that really need that program-facing frontline staff. Those roles, as we all know, can be really difficult to fill, in part because the pay wages are comparable to working at fast food. And so when we're trying to fill those frontline services roles with part-time, things like that, there can be a really great fit there that is good for the student because it's the equivalent to that other job that they're doing, but it's going to help them professionally take that first step. So I think there's a real mutual benefit there.
And then has there been anything historically challenging for you and your nonprofit with WorkStudy?
Yeah, I think there's the potential mismatch between the UCSC academic calendar and like the programmatic needs for a nonprofit organization or any organization. So like the fact that we serve kiddos and that the local city schools went back 2 weeks ago, but our WorkStudy students, aren't coming back until the end of the month. That can be problematic. Same thing, we are fully staffed for summer programs because we're serving kids from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That said, so many of our WorkStudy students do stay on and switch on to regular payroll, at the end of their WorkStudy. So that can be a challenge, but there are ways around that. Heidi also mentioned when Rose asked the question about virtual work, transportation can be problematic. So we tend to have a lot more WorkStudy students at our downtown clubhouse than we do in Scotts Valley or Live Oak. And a lot of that just comes down to the ease of transportation. So it's easier for our WorkStudy students to get to downtown because of public transportation rather than across town. I would say it can also be difficult for both the student and our staff member to know what the remaining balance is. It sounds like Heidi and their team is aware of this and they're working towards some solutions there. But you can imagine when you're getting into like April and the student's like, I don't know how many WorkStudy hours I have left. You don't know when to transition them onto regular payroll. So that's something that can be a challenge. And then additionally, it can just require additional input of staff time, but the pay benefits are really worth it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, this role, I started this role in December, so I'm really trying to revamp some of those challenges so it maybe aligns more with what happens outside of the university. And then lastly, is there anything else you'd like to share with other nonprofits about WorkStudy?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, especially with like the introduction of GANAS as well, is that WorkStudy can meet the immediate needs, like the staffing needs of a lot of our nonprofits. And again, doing that frontline essential work that we're doing. But I think it can also dovetail and really further the mission of the organization. So for the Boys and Girls Club, I guess as one of the old administrators, the old guys, I often see our WorkStudy staff not only as peers, but also as the youth that we're helping to develop. You know, a lot of our WorkStudy students are 18, 19, 20 because they're in that earlier portion of school. And this might be a first real job for them. And it's really awesome to see them take that role and really take that next level in my mind of the youth work that we're doing. It can also be a way of us sharing access and transparency to how the nonprofit world works and opening up really career opportunities that help to advance EDI and other things that we care about as an organization, and that I know a lot of the organizations on this call care a lot. So I think it can be that mutual benefit. I think there's also the possibility of thinking outside the box. You know, again, we typically do these youth-facing roles, things like education directors, athletic directors, things like that. That said, I know historically there have been some WorkStudy students that are doing more community outreach. And again, when I look at the people on this call, I think these could be young, energetic folks that are out there representing your organizations at like community events and things like that. So boothing and doing community outreach. And so I think that's one way of doing it. I also think, you know, so many of you here wear multiple hats, you know, development, executive leadership, marketing, communications. How often have we said, I wish we had a Marcoms person to just do social media? And so I think exploring some of those areas that would be a perfect fit for a WorkStudy student to do remotely. They could do that from campus, where they're also going to be in some ways more native on those platforms and apps that we may not be useful to. There's a win-win there, where I think there's a way that takes some of that burden and adds capacity in a really cost-effective way, and in a way that lets the students do something that they're really good at in terms of, you know, graphic, visual design, marketing, social media. And then additionally, I would say that many of our WorkStudy staff do stay on and work beyond their WorkStudy period. And to quote our clubhouse directors, it's worth the hassle. So the fact that they keep asking, you know, when does WorkStudy open? Because they know that that's a reliable pool of staff that they can make that early investment in, and that a lot of the staff will stick around for years to come.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I wanted to just also follow up and say one of the other great benefits to working, you know, being a WorkStudy partner is on our side, on the career success side, we'll also be uplifting the WorkStudy postings and promoting WorkStudy postings to the correct student demographic. So we'll also be kind of doing some promotion on behalf of all the WorkStudy jobs that are offered to our students. So that's also a nice benefit as well. All right, with that, I'm going to stop recording here and just appreciate everyone's input here. And then we'll open it up for to unmute for questions.